Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you're doing well. My name is Jimmy, aka Perceptes, and welcome to Patch and Play, a live stream that I do roughly once a week, where we spend a couple of hours together doing a patch from scratch on my modular synthesizer, which you see before you. And these are generally not really planned out in advance. Sometimes I have a bit of an idea of what we might explore, but I have certainly not rehearsed anything. I haven't tried the patch that I'm about to partake on, and we just kind of explore and see where things go. As always, I will start with a couple minutes of introduction as people start to trickle into the live stream. If you're not familiar with modular synthesis, it's a way of doing electronic music where instead of a single synthesizer as a keyboard or a software VST, you build up a larger instrument with these little modules where each one of these little boxes individually performs generally sort of one specific function that's part of a larger synthesizer. And there's a zillion of these things available. And you pick and choose the ones that are interesting to you to construct a system that is custom to what you want and what you are trying to do. And they communicate with each other via electricity over these little patch cables. You just plug them into the jacks and they send an electrical signal between, and that is used to transmit audio and control signals. And so you patch all of these things together with these cables, change the settings to what you want, and you can make music with it. So with these streams, had a couple of goals. One is to just be entertaining, to have a good time kind of geeking out about this hobby for a couple of hours. But I also really like teaching, and I like helping people understand things that I do. I don't profess to be an expert in anything that we're going to talk about, but to the best of my ability, I do like to share what I know, and it's very satisfying to sort of see the light bulb go on for someone. So a goal I have of these streams is to sort of gear the patch and the sort of discussion towards the interests of whoever is here watching live. So for anyone who is here today in the chat, please say hello. And if at any point you have questions about modular synthesis in general, about any of the particular pieces of gear that I have here on the desk, about techniques, anything that you'd like to know, please do speak up, because I would like to gear what we do towards what you are interested in and not just you sort of passively watching over my shoulder. Although that's fine too, if there's nothing specific that anyone is interested in. I do want to sort of give as authentic as possible sort of experience of what it's like to start with a blank slate in modular synthesis and work towards something. When I post a performance video that's like a finished patch and I'm making real music with it, I include captions that sort of explain the key aspects of the patch, but it's kind of hard to understand from just seeing the finished state. Like, how do you get to that point, and how would you have ever come up with this? So that is one of the goals of this stream also, is to kind of show the process, to sort of demystify a little bit, and show that even though it looks confusing because there's so many cables, it's, if you go piece by piece, cable by cable, it's not really as difficult as it looks, or it's certainly something that everyone can learn. Trubus 1085, welcome to the stream. Nice to see you. Afterlife Registry, good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. So, if you've been following my channel, you may have seen that last week I had a video on Doppler, which is this new module from Jasmine and Olive Trees. Let me zoom in on the right case so we can talk about this. This little thin module right here. And so I did a deep dive on this module, going through all of the details of it, how it works with a bunch of example patches. This is a drum synthesis module. So you send it audio signals, and it processes the audio signals to produce different types of drum sounds, which change depending on the audio input that you give it. And it's very interesting. And one of the things that is really, really cool about it, and quite novel and has been kind of generating a lot of buzz, is that it's a digital module. So it's essentially just like software in a box. But it has a bunch of different firmwares that have completely different functions. And this is not a new thing by any means. Like, I have the the noise engineering modules down here, the Alia line and the Versio line, that have work kind of the same way, where you buy one piece of hardware, but there's a bunch of different firmwares with different functions that run on the same platform. And you can use a USB cable plugged to your computer to flash a different firmware onto them. And then they sell these little overlay panels that you can set on top that change the labels of the controls to match what the other firmware it does. So you kind of know what you're doing when you're using it in one of these different modes. And Doppler works similarly. There's 4 different firmwares that currently run on this sort of DSP platform that they've created. And they come with these little overlay panels. When you buy Doppler, it actually comes with all of the overlays for the 3 other firmwares. And the thing that's really cool about Doppler is that you can switch the firmware automatically by just laying the overlay on top of the panel. So like what I said with the noise engineering ones, and I think other sort of modules that work this way, you have to turn the power of your case off, pull the module out of your system, plug it into the computer with a USB cable, open a website and like a little, WYSIWYG GUI interface, flash the thing on via that, reinstall it in your case, turn the power back on. But with Doppler, it's got this really clever system. I don't know how well you can see it, but right here, there's these 2 little light sensors that use infrared light so that you can't see anything with your eyes, but there's like little lights coming out of there. And then on these panels, there's these 2 reflective sort of circles on the back of the panel. And let me grab one of the other ones. Each one of the different firmwares has a different combination of those circles. So if nothing is reflecting, then it's in its default state as Doppler. And then if it sees the reflection of 2 infrared signals, then you get Dor. On one side is Rubin, and then the other side is Lichen, which I don't think we're going to look at today. And so all you do is you just drop this panel on it. And if you watch the LEDs when I put this on, you'll see it flash. Like it's kind of rebooting, and then boom, now you're in the Dor firmware. It's so cool. So you don't have to uninstall anything. I didn't even have to turn the power of the case off. I literally just dropped the overlay on. And then similarly, if I just take it off, it will instantly reboot to Doppler. Really, really cool. And so my understanding from Jasmine and Olive Trees is that they're planning additional sort of families of firmware for this sort of DSP platform module, as they're calling it. So Doppler is what you buy the hardware as, and it ships with 3 additional overlay panels, 3 additional firmwares. And those 4 together are called like the shape family, because they're all sort of related to shaping signals, like in a sort of envelope sense. But they're planning additional firmware families. So there is a USB jack on the back of this module, and if you pull it out of your case and plug it in, there's like a web editor, just like these other digital platform modules, that allow you to change additional settings, and in the future will also allow you to flash a different group of firmware onto the module. So presumably there will be even more sort of overlay panels in the future that can continue to expand the functionality of this module. So just from like a dollar to functionality perspective, this thing is pretty awesome. And I spent a little bit of time with the kind of the alternative firmwares. The manuals for them weren't published initially, and so I couldn't really talk about them much in the deep dive video that I did last week. But since then, the manual for Dor and the manual for Rubin has been published, and I assume Lichen is coming pretty soon. So I thought today maybe a good subject would be to kind of explore 1 or possibly 2 of the alternative firmwares for Doppler. And again, if you want to see the details of Doppler itself, check out the video, because it's covered pretty exhaustively. I don't want to just go through that again here. So yeah, that's the plan that I had for today. And as always, let me know if you have questions about it or about anything else. I'm happy to divert to talk about other things in the case, whatever else you want. It doesn't have to be this. This is just what I plan to do if there's no particular questions. So let me take a quick break to have some tea, and then we will dive in. Satcom Demon, welcome to the stream. Basimilus and Desmodus. Yes, I have those also. Well, I guess I bought Basimilus, and then I used the Desmodus firmware decently often, but I actually bought these Versio modules as Ruina and Polydactyl, which is distortion and multiband compression and expansion. But currently the right one is flashed to the Desmodus, which is kind of the most popular one. It's just a reverb. But yeah, it's awesome to pay like $10 for an overlay rather than $400 for a new module whenever you want to try one of these out. But Doppler takes that to the next level, makes it even easier. Okay, so let's reboot back into the Door firmware. So I may need to consult the manual on my phone as we go through this, because I'm not an expert in these alternative firmwares yet. I played with them a little bit, but not a huge amount. So Door is a stereo filter and low-pass gate. It can operate as either of those two. So on the panel, there is a stereo input, left-right, stereo output, left-right, and then there's an input for a trigger, which I think basically determines whether or not it's a low-pass gate or a stereo filter. I mean, a low-pass gate is a filter in some sense, but there's not like if you don't patch a trigger in here, there's no built-in envelope. It's just kind of constantly processing the sound like a normal filter would. But if you patch a trigger cable into this trigger jack, then it will silence the output unless a trigger comes in, at which point it will sort of open the gate temporarily to let a bit of sound in. So we've got a trigger that switches between LPG and stereo filter mode. Excuse me. And then we've got controls over the 4 knobs, which are frequency. So this is just your frequency cutoff, like on a standard filter. And if you're using this in LPG mode, then it'll be like the ceiling of the filter. So like that's how much the gate will open. Decay is the decay time of the envelope when using it in LPG mode. And I believe if you don't have a trigger signal patched in and you're just using it as a stereo filter, then this knob will actually affect some aspect of sort of the feedback circuit for the resonance. You've then got a resonance and a timbre control. Resonance is pretty standard, like on all filters. It just it increases the amount of feedback at the cutoff point, so it kind of gives it more of like a squelchy sound. And one thing that's interesting about Door's resonance control is that the very bottom part of the range of the knob turn actually changes the slope of the filter rather than affecting resonance. So I think when your resonance is like all the way counterclockwise, it's like a one pole low pass filter. So a very gentle slope on how much of the signal it cuts out. And then as you start to turn it a little bit, like the first 5 or 10% of the knob turn, I think maybe up until about 9 o'clock like that, will morph from a 1 pole to a 2 pole filter. And then after that point, it'll start to give you standard resonance, where the volume of the cutoff frequency is increased until it starts to self-oscillate and produce a tone even without input. And then the timbre knob, I'll have to look up again to see the specifics, but it's kind of got like some distortion, feedback, overdrive, wave foldings, something kind of in that ballpark that just kind of dramatically changes the drive and the character of the sound being passed through as you sweep through. From my memory, it kind of increases the volume significantly, so I think a compressor is probably a good module to pair with this, just so you don't blow out your ears as you're turning the timbre knob, and hopefully I will not do that to any of you. Let me check in, see if there's anyone else who has arrived. Ted Rosner, hello, my friend. Thank you for coming back, as always. Good to see you. Herbie Brady, welcome to the stream. I don't know if I've seen you before. If not, welcome. Very happy to have you. For those of you that missed the intro, do let me know if you have any questions about like what we're doing here, what this is all about. But it's just a patch from scratch where we're going to be playing around with the modular synth, and today we're in particular exploring Door, which is one of the alternative firmwares for the new Doppler module from Jasmine and Olive Trees. So I think that's pretty much the panel. The last thing to mention on the panel is the button. If you press that, you'll see the little LED at the top left will toggle on and off, and this turns off like additional sort of cross modulation feedback, so it will take the audio output of the module and feed it back as a control signal to, I think, the frequency and the resonance controls. So basically you'll just get some kind of audio rate modulation that'll make it sound more gnarly, give you a lot of extra harmonics. Okay, a bit more tea, and then maybe we'll start patching this up so we can actually listen to it and not just hear me blab all day. But I think I covered pretty much all of the controls, and we might need to refer to the manual a bit to see if we're if some of the details there. Oh, I forgot to mention also. I don't know if you can see well on the camera, but there's a little like drawing of a sort of a noise signal that's pointed to the left input. So there's an internal noise generator that's normaled to the input, meaning that if you don't patch any input audio signals in, you can still get drum sounds because there's going to be a noise source that is triggered whenever you send it a trigger. So we can get, maybe we'll start with that actually before we even patch in a sound and listen to some of its sort of default drum sounds. How does that sound? Okay, let's get a cable from, what should we use? Maybe just the, since I have it nearby, I can use the stochastic triggers from the Oct expander, and we'll send those into the trigger input. And let me patch in the audio so that we can actually hear this thing. So left output, we will send to our first channel mixer. Right output into the right of that input. Let's unmute it and let's see. Okay, I'm going to turn the decay, the timbre, the resonance all the way down, but let's turn the frequency all the way up so we can let through the full signal. I'm going to speed up the rate of oct so we get faster triggers. Okay, it's fairly quiet while the signal is, or while the envelope of this thing is very short. So as always, give me feedback about the volume of my voice as compared to the audio from the modular. I want to make sure you can still hear me and that it's neither me or the music is too loud. I do intend to set up kind of a better system for this so that my when I speak, it automatically ducks the volume, but I have not yet done that. Always something to improve. So here's the sort of default sound of this. When I have the filter completely open, the decay is shorted as it'll go, the resonance all the way down, the timbre all the way down. We're just listening to the internal noise source that's triggering. We're opening the low pass gate to hear a bit of that sound. And this is just a stochastic trigger from Oct that kind of just gives you triggers at not exactly random intervals, but for this purpose, we can kind of consider the input to be just random triggers. So this is kind of gives you like a sort of a hi-hat or shaker sort of sound. If we start to open up the decay, we should hear more of that noise. And it does seem that there's actually a decent amount of variance here. You can hear that some of these hits are sort of louder and longer than others. And I think I don't want to misspeak about how this works, but I think that some degree of like analysis of the input signal is part of what this module does. Like it kind of reacts differently based on what the audio input is. So even though we're sending it constant triggers that are all the same, you do get some variety in sort of the tone of the output, I guess depending on exactly what sort of frequency the noise happened to be at the moment the trigger came in. This might be easier to hear once we patch in our own audio signal. But it kind of gives you some degree of dynamics so that you're not just getting a very mechanical, constant sort of hi-hat sound that sounds exactly the same on each trigger. There's like some built-in variance, which I think is kind of one of the goals of the different firmwares on this DSP platform module. They want it to be very dynamic and kind of give you something that sounds interesting and alive without having to patch up a bunch of modulation to do that. Hey, Bad Machine, welcome to the stream. Good to see you, my friend. It's always a pleasure. So yeah, let's turn up the decay more. Listen to a bit more of this. So now we start to get into kind of a more open hi-hat territory. So there is really a lot of variation you can hear. I think there's also, similar to the natural gate, this module also, I think all of the firmwares have a few settings that you can control via the web interface that you can't do directly from the panel. that turn on and off things like how much it reacts to the frequency of the incoming audio and how much it reacts to the rate at which triggers arrive. So similar to natural gate, it will actually change the sound based on how close together the triggers are. So if you trigger it faster, it'll open the gate more on each trigger. So it's actually paying attention to sort of the tempo of the triggers, and it's changing its sound over time based on the tempo that it detects. And the reason it does this is it's trying to mimic the way that your hand would work if you were playing a physical instrument like a drum. If you take a drumstick or just use your hand like tapping on the table or something, and you tap really slowly, you can tap very gently without much force. But if you speed up the rate that you're tapping, it's very hard to not also increase the force that you're hitting the table with. It's just kind of a natural result of the speed being kind of tied to the force at which you're hitting the surface that's resonating. So that's the reason for this feature, that it, like, the faster the trigger comes in, the more the gate opens because you're hitting it harder. And so I think that's also part of the reason why we hear like different sort of sounds across the triggers. So it's kind of a cool effect. And you can toggle that on and off with the USB software. So if you don't want it to do that, you can plug it into the computer and toggle that off, and it remembers that state across power cycles. And a cool thing that I noticed is that it actually does that for each of the firmwares individually. So you can say, I do want Door to do this, but I don't want Doppler to do that, and it'll remember it per firmware. So it's really a very well thought out design for how to control this thing. Okay, I think we should probably plug in an audio source so we're not just listening to this white noise forever. Let's do ONA, since I have it right by. Let's just start with a sine wave. I'm going to plug that in. And let's start with the decay all the way down, the filter all the way open. It's very quiet. Might need to run it through another mixer or something to boost the gain here. I don't know how well you can even hear that, but let's increase the decay a bit. So that's with the decay about halfway. And then let's open it all the way. So with a sine wave, you may not be obvious. Let me switch to like a sawtooth. But it's affecting the frequency and the volume of the sound at the same time. So each one of these little blips gets quieter as over the course of the decay, but it also loses the high frequency content, which kind of makes a pluckier, more natural sound. And again, that kind of varied rate of the trigger causes each hit to be slightly different. Let's try closing the filter a little bit so that the gate doesn't open as much on each trigger. Maybe do halfway. So yeah, there is a lot of change in sort of the dynamics level. Like it's a lot less loud. Let's run this through Messer so we can compress this a bit and try to keep the levels a bit more constant, just so you can hear it clearly over my voice in the times when it gets quieter. So let's compress it quite a lot. We'll just start at like limiting and kind of standard attack and release. Let's give it a little bit more gain. Let's try messing with the frequency again. Hopefully that's not too bad. Okay, and let's try turning up the resonance also. So I'll put the frequency cutoff a little lower. And again, so as I start to bring up the resonance, the first kind of 10% of the knob turn is just morphing from a 1-pole filter to a 2-pole filter, so it should get a little quieter in the high content. You hear that? It's very subtle. Let me go back and forth. You hear more of the high frequency content in the 1-pole mode. And then it gets kind of more muted in the top end. The brightness dies away as we go into 2-pole. And then from this point on, then we start to get actual resonance. And it seems like the decay is actually applying a pitch envelope. So you get like these kind of percussive hits, which is actually kind of cool. So we can get very sort of like laser sounds with a short decay. And of course, this is processing the input, so we can change the input signal to change the sound completely. Let's go down an octave. Interesting. Yes, Bad Machine. We're exploring the alternative firmwares of Doppler. So I did a deep dive video on Doppler that came out last week. But it comes with 3 overlay panels, and you can automatically switch the firmware to one of the other 3 options by just laying the overlay panel on it. It uses a little light sensor to automatically switch to the other firmwares without needing to plug a USB cable in. And so we're just trying out one of the other firmwares. This is DOOR, which is a stereo low-pass gate and filter. It can operate as either of the two. If you give it a trigger signal, then it's a low-pass gate. If I unplug the trigger, then it's just a stereo filter, which I guess we're not really using right now because I only have one input plugged in. So let's take, actually, let me switch to a shorter cable here. Let's plug in 2 different signals. So maybe I'll do two of the sort of complex waveforms into the left and right input. Give us a little bit of stereo image, maybe. Now I've got the resonance and the decay turned way up. Give it a little bit more gain. So this is with the resonance all the way up, just kind of moving the frequency around to hear what it sounds like in the sort of stereo filter mode. So we're not sending it a trigger anymore, so we don't get that LPG behavior. And in this mode, the decay knob changes its behavior because there's no more envelope since we're not triggering anything. So the decay in this, when you have a no trigger patched in, is repurposed as, I believe they explain it as like a DC offset being sent to the feedback path of the filter. So you get kind of a symmetrical feedback and distortion when the knob is at noon, and then turning counterclockwise or clockwise from that point will kind of increase the asymmetry of the distortion, which also increases the volume, which is why I have it plugged into a compressor. So you can get all sorts of different sounds from this. Let's turn the resonance down a little bit. Here's kind of just what DOOR sounds like as a normal partially resonant filter without any self-oscillation. It's got a good sound. Let's bring the resonance all the way down. There's just kind of a clean frequency, or a clean filter sweep. If we go all the way down on the resonance knob, we'll get that very, very gentle slope. This is a very smooth sweep. But let's get some resonance back. And then the timbre knob we haven't really looked at yet. I've got it in the fully counterclockwise position. Let's try just sweeping through and hearing the different sounds. So I think when you're using this in like the LPG mode, let's plug the trigger back in. This is the timbre knob is supposed to sort of simulate like the material that you're striking. I think I forget the exact terms in the manual, but they kind of describe it as if you imagine that you were hitting a drum, and each one of these triggers was like a drum hit, then the timbre kind of controls the hardness of the thing that you're striking. So you have kind of softer surfaces on the low end of the timbre control, and then they get harder as you go up. You can hear there's more of a kind of percussive attack as I increase the timbre. And now it has like a very sharp kind of transient right on the initial hit in the upper range as we start to get into wave folding of the signal. And in LPG mode, because there is like an envelope being applied to the sound, with a high resonance, it's also affecting sort of the dominant pitch that you hear. And so you can get those kind of kick drummy sounds. Let's try going to a really low octave. So you can kind of get these sort of digital glitchy kind of kick drum sounds. So different combinations of resonance and decay will give you different kind of qualities of pitch envelope. You start to get more into kind of electronic kick drum territory here when you have a shorter decay with a high resonance, and started closing down the filter a little bit more will get you into kick drum territory. You can go down another octave. It starts to get pretty quiet because there's so much of the frequency content that has been removed. But yes, it does have CV control over, who's this? Quasar Music, welcome to the stream. And Molly, welcome to the stream. Yes, it has CV control over frequency and decay and resonance and timbre. So all of the knobs are CV controllable. So we can indeed send it our own signals. So let's unplug the trigger and let's try another random signal to start. I'll just take one of the logic signals from the oct expander. Let's try patching that into frequency. So this is kind of a pseudo randomly fluctuating signal that mostly stays in the sort of higher voltage range. I can use the rate on the oct expander to change the rate of change. If I go really fast, then we'll start to get kind of audio rate modulation stuff. But the frequency knob controls the point at which the modulation is starting. Oh, that sounds really cool with kind of the more wave folder level of timbre here. I mean, that sound already is so different than anything we've heard yet, just by modulating the frequency and trying different combinations of controls. Let's try pressing the button, which will turn on that like cross modulation thing. It gives us a little more high frequency content, maybe not so obvious with these settings. But when this light is lit, it's taking the audio output and routing it back in to the frequency and resonance CV input. So we're essentially using the audio as a control signal. Yeah. Oh, Quasar, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mowgli, welcome to the stream. Yes, this is absolutely robot fart territory. Okay, so one thing I was thinking about doing here, let me unplug this for a second, and let's plug a trigger back in. Or actually, I'm just going to mute this while I set this up. I think it would be really fun to just kind of do random modulations on all four of the potentiometer controls to just kind of make kind of a glitchy texture that's not really something that we're carefully programming, but just kind of seeing where we can go. So something I really like doing is Unplug these. I like to use a combination of mimetic digitalis, which is this 4-channel CV sequencer with 16 steps. And right next to it, I have lapsus os, which is a 4-channel attenuverter. And so this is really good for getting kind of like random modulations. If we send this a clock signal, which I guess we can just do by, we can just take the first trigger output of the expander of oct into this N input, and every time a trigger comes across, it'll advance to the next step on mimetic digitalis. Each one of these lights in the grid is a step out of 16 steps, and there's 4 channels. If I hold the load button and press the shred button, it will pick a random CV value, I believe between 0 and 5 volts, for every single step of that grid of 16 steps across all 4 channels. And so you can kind of see the LEDs at the outputs at the top here are changing in intensity on each step. And that sort of is a visual representation of the voltage coming out of that jack. So let me grab, let's grab 4 cables, and we will plug the 4 channels of mimetic into the inputs of lapsus os. And this will allow us to, in real time, control the amount of that signal that we're letting through to the door module. Okay, so 4 outs there, and let's do, sure, we'll use our clear cables, and I just dropped a cable, but that's fine. So let's take the outputs of these 4 channels, and we're going to go into frequency. The second one will be decay. The third one will be resonance. And the fourth one will be timbre. And so now so we're getting nothing right now because I have the sliders all the way down, which means that none of the signals from mimetic digitalis are being passed through. But as I increase these sliders, then it's going to start letting that signal through. So let me unmute it, and you can just barely hear that low sound because the filter, I think, when the frequency knob is turned completely down, it goes down to like 10 kilohertz or something. So there's a little bit of low end that you can hear. But if we let in this random modulation on the first channel that controls the frequency, then on each step, each time the mimetic digitalis advances to the next step, we get a different CV value for frequency. Let's maybe speed it up a bit. And so let's bring in the signal for decay. This may not be so obvious in this mode because it's influencing that sort of feedback path and not the decay of the note, like in a low-pass gate sense. Then we have resonance. Now we're really hearing it. And then the fourth channel is the timbre. How cool is that? Love it. And so we can play with this in real time. I can kind of bring in the amount of randomness on any of these 4 parameters. This is so damn cool. And of course, this is with a sequence of CV signals across these 4 channels that is the same on every loop. But at any time, I can hold the load button, press shred again, and we'll get a new sequence of 16 CV values across all 4 channels. So we get sort of like a different rhythmic pattern each time. Got some new people filtering in. Milos, oh my god, your stuff is coming today. Congratulations, my friend. You got to come back next week and let us know how it's all working out. For those that weren't here last week, Milos has just ordered a whole bunch of modular gear to get started on their journey. Mimetic Digitulus is on the list for Trubus to purchase. Yeah, so I have Mimetic Digitalis, which is the original version of this module. There's a new one that came out maybe a year or so ago called Mimetic Digitulus. Nice pun. And it's like a kind of an evolved version of this that actually has a screen instead of the LEDs and a bunch of extra features beyond what this one does. But this works perfectly fine for my purposes, so I haven't felt the need to upgrade to the other one. Herbie Brady, welcome to the stream. Thank you very much. IBS music, that's a great description. I think if we pull the resonant sound, it won't quite sound so much like that. It's so sort of burpy. But you can vary this a lot just by changing the amount of attenuation on each of these channels. Yes, Herbie Brady, we are playing with Door. That's this one right here that all these cables are plugged into. This is one of the 3 alternative firmwares for the new Doppler module from Jasmine and Olive Trees. If you check my channel last Tuesday, I think, I released a deep dive on Doppler, which is the base module that you purchase. And it comes with 3 overlay panels with 3 additional firmwares for the same digital module. And you just lay the overlay on top of the module and it automatically switches to the other firmware, so you don't have to plug it into your computer to reflash it. That's really awesome. So we did a deep dive of Doppler, the base module, in the video that I posted last week, and today we're just experimenting with Door, which is one of the 3 alternative firmwares. And it is a stereo low-pass gate or filter. If you patch in a trigger signal, then it works as a low-pass gate with its own built-in envelope, and if you don't patch in a trigger signal, it's just passing through the audio like a normal filter. And so here we're giving random modulations to the filter cutoff, the resonance, the sort of asymmetry of the feedback loop, and the amount of like wave folding, essentially. And that's what these 4 channels correspond to. Ted Rosner says controversial, but I think the user experience of the Digitalis is better than the Digitulus. That was my impression also. It kind of seemed like it was a little too much for what I would want. I think in a smaller case where you really want to maximize the functionality of sort of the width that you have, then it's kind of more to me akin to something like Pamela's Pro Workout, where it has a lot of different stuff that it can do in a small box, but that also means necessarily that you're going to have to be going through menus and doing a lot more configuration, whereas the original Mimetic Digitalis is more limited in its capability, but everything is just like a button press away. So it works perfectly fine for what I'm doing. Okay, let's get, I think we need to add to this effects, and I think like another kind of beat to sort of act as the foundation here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take the trigger signal out of Mimetic Digitalis and use that as the clock for Steppy, which is a 4-channel gate sequencer we can use for drums. And then let's patch the channels on this into some of my other percussion modules. I've got Crater here, I often use as my kick drum. Kraken, which is a snare drum. And maybe for the 3rd channel, we can go down into the small case below, and I can use Timpleggio. So let me unplug this for a second. Let me get a long cable. We'll plug the 3rd channel on Steppy into Timpleggio as the trigger. And I'm not sure what we'll do for the 4th channel. Maybe 3 is enough for now. And let me patch in the audio outputs for these. So I'm going to move this to maybe the 5th channel here, just to orient myself. I like to have my drums on the first channels of the mixer. So kick drum on channel 1, just plug in all the audio outputs from each module into the mixer. Let's see if these cables are going to be long enough. that'll do. Okay, and then we need to program in a sequence. So let's go back to the right case. And on channel 1 of Mimetic Digitalis, let's give it 4 on the floor. Let's get just a little bit of overdrive on that kick. Yeah, that helps a lot, just having some foundation for this. Do I use monitors, asks Trubus. I'm using headphones right now, but I do have some monitors set up on either side of my desk. I don't use them all that often, but sometimes when I'm just jamming. Let's see. Okay, let's switch to the second channel. Give us just a simple backbeat on the snare drum. I mean, I already love this. It's just so cool. Milos asks, how do I record? Do I record into a DAW? Yes, I use a fairly simple process for recording. I don't multi-track my modular. So I have a single stereo out, which if I go to the output, so on the zoomed out view where you can see the whole desk, if you look at the top right case of this dark case, there you can see there's 2 black cables with little purple tags coming out of the back of the case. That's a stereo output, so I've got the output of Mixa, which is my main performance mixer. Stereo main mix is going into the main output of the Intelligent Stereo I/O, and so this inside the case is wired up to the 1/4-inch jacks on the back of the case, and those are going into my audio interface. So I just have a single stereo mix of the entire modular setup. Depending on what I'm using, I sometimes have other instruments on the table, like I have the ASM Hydrosynth, and I've got like Digitone, Digitact, a few other things like that. And so if I'm using multiple things, then I'll take a stereo mix of each of them. But I don't, currently I don't like to multi-track because I don't want to kind of over-engineer the mixing after the fact. So I'm kind of more focused on the ephemerality of music right now, like doing a performance, kind of capturing it mostly as is, and not trying to make something that's like, studio release or anything. But if you do want to do that, then I think it's important to think about how you're going to do that, and it's going to require a multi-track audio interface. Very commonly, people use the Expert Sleepers ES9, which is a module that has direct inputs, 3.5 millimeter jacks for, I think, eight or more different audio signals, and then it itself is an audio interface. So with a single USB cable, you plug that into your computer, and then you can multi-track multiple signals from your modular system. Yes, the audio interface that you use with your computer is also a factor. So as Quasar is mentioning, there's the 16 rig from Arturia, which is good for synths because it doesn't have a lot of mic preamps. It's just a lot of like stereo 1/4-inch jack pairs. So you can have like essentially 8 stereo pairs of audio coming in on that. So if you're not using a modular mixer, you just have to make sure that whatever audio interface you're using can handle very loud signals, because Eurorack runs much louder than the standard sort of professional line level, and so it may come in very, very hot on an interface designed for line level signals. Okay, let's change up the pattern. And let's get in a hi-hat pattern for the Timpleggio. What did I just do there? That's not what I meant to do. Switch to channel C. That might be a little much. This is cool as hell. All right, should we get some effects going on this? I think we should. So why don't we use the Erica synth stuff today instead of C-Legs, which is what I usually use. So let's get a new pattern. Bring the filter cutoff down a little bit, keep it a little lower, and then I need a minute or so to patch all of this stuff up. Let me see if these cables are long enough. Oh yeah, this will work fine. So the Zare Mixa, which is the mixer I use, has 2 stereo send and return paths. So most commonly I use the first pair for delay and the second pair for reverb. So I've got these two Erica Synths effects modules in my little pod case. Plug the first one into the delay and the second one into the reverb. And then we'll be able to send as much of the dry signal of each of the channels as we want into these individual effects. So first things first, let's go to our door voice. Let's give it some reverb. I'm thinking kind of a basic reverb. I'm going to set the reverb to, let's zoom in on the base so you can see what I'm doing. This may not be the best in terms of visibility, let's see. Oh, that's not too bad. So this reverb has 3 different sort of delay types and 3 different size ranges. It's got a tape, a bucket brigade delay, and a digital delay. I think for something dirty and glitchy like this, we want to use the bucket brigade delay, which is like an analog emulation. And then it's got 3, the switch on the right changes between room reverb, hall reverb, and cathedral reverb. I think probably start with just the room reverb. I mean, it has its own dry-wet control, but because we're using it as a send effect, we only want the wet signal from the module because we're going to control the amount of reverb that we hear via the amount of send on the mixer. So let's do that with the delay also. Turn that all the way up to maximum wet. And then this big knob is just the size of the reverb. Turn up the feedback. Turn up the tone a little bit so we have a little bit more in terms of the high end of the sound. I actually think this will sound good with a modulation on the size to kind of give it some wackiness. So let me send, let's just do a stepped random signal from the Oct Expander, and I'm going to send that into the size input to modulate the size of the reverb over time. Let's increase there's a built-in attenuator on size. So you hear that kind of flutteriness. That's cool. Let me attenuate it a bit so we're not changing quite as much on each step. That's cool. And then we can kind of stabilize that modulation by just bringing down the attenuator. Okay, so how about some delay? Let me give a tap tempo to this. Okay, and let's start to bring in some delay. The delay similarly has a tape, DVD, and digital mode. So I think we want, again, DVD. And then it's got 3 sort of variants that I think are related to sort of the stereo imaging. So maybe we'll just do a normal stereo delay, or maybe a little bit of a crossfeed. turn up the feedback to get more repeats on that delay. We could also experiment with like giving this different time divisions. Let's change up the pattern. That's cool as hell. Let's mess with the modulation amounts. The rate to change the tempo, or our whole project really slow it down. Get really sluggish. Bring back in that reverb size modulation. Hell yeah, it dooms. This is cool. And of course we can also change the actual pots on door to change the offsets of the controls that are being modulated with all this stuff down here. Yeah. We could also try going the other way because Lapsus Os can go into an attenuversion mode. So one thing we could try is turning the frequency knob on the door all the way up and then inverting the frequency control randomization. So now it's open by default and the modulation from Mimetic Digitalis will be inverted by Lapsus Os and will be essentially modulating the frequency down from its initial starting point. So as I attenuate that inverted signal, we'll hear more of the high frequency content, and as we let the modulation through, it starts to bring it into the lower ranges. That's awesome. Maybe a modulation signal on the delay delay time as well. Let's take a logic signal, like a slower, lower logic signal from Octa Expander, and we want to go into it's labeled size CV, but I think it's a misprint. It's actually supposed to be time CV. So now we're modulating the tempo of the delay. Might need a stronger signal for this. Something that's... This should just get us more glitchiness. That's cool. Nice. Let's get another modulation signal into the kick drum's overdrive. Or saturation, I guess. And maybe let's try modulating maybe the decay time of the snare. Busier hi-hat pattern. I think maybe modulating the decay time of the hi-hat could be good here too. Take another logic signal from the Octa Expander into the decay CV on Timpleggio, which is what I'm using as the hi-hat. And I'm going to put the potentiometer pretty low so that our sort of baseline hi-hat is very snappy. We also have this wackitude control on the hi-hat, which is just kind of a timbral change. So we can try putting like a slow bipolar LFO into that to kind of slowly move the knob back and forth for some timbral changes on the hi-hat. Pretty damn cool. Let's try switching the reverb into the hall mode to get more spacious reverb sound. I'm going to turn the feedback on the reverb and the delay up really high. So cool. All just born from random modulation into door. cross modulation on door should give us even nuttier sort of high frequency content from that feedback loop of modulation. Of course, we've been using the same input this whole time. Which is the two complex waveforms on Ona. I think it's like a saw wave mixed... Wait, what is it? It's a saw wave mixed with a pulse wave and a triangle wave mixed with a pulse wave? Something like that. So we can use this little pulse wave with modulation trimmer to change the width of the pulse aspect of those two complex waveforms. We can change the octave. Bad Machine says this needs a heavily distorted something, like a pad or a lead, something to fill out the mids and highs. Yeah, I agree. We need another voice to really make this shine. Anyone have a preference on what we use for another melodic voice? Well, I think maybe just to keep it all easy to see in the right case, I'll stick to the right side. We could use maybe Manus into Ruina. Okay, let me plug in. Yeah, we'll just use it as a. We'll use Ruina Versio as an insert effect. Okay, so let's do the Manus output into the mono Ruina Versio input, and then Ruina Versio in stereo out into our mixer. And we're going to need to trigger this, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug the trigger from the drums, and I'm going to send that into a molt. We're going to molt one signal back to the clock, and then I'm going to go to the cam overhead for a second. I'm going to send a copy of our clock signal all the way across to the other case, and I'm going to send it into branches, the mutable instruments module. So let's take that copy of the clock, send it into the input of the first channel of branches, and then we're going to send output A of that channel of branches into Manus. Alright, you can already start to hear Manus. So the reason that I wanted to send this through branches is because I don't want Manus to trigger on every single clock pulse. And if we send it into branches, then for every trigger that comes in, there's like a coin flip probability. It's just a coin flip, and if it's heads, it comes out of out A. If it's tails, it comes out of out B. But if we only patch out A, then we essentially have like a 50% probability that any trigger will be passed through to the destination. So 50% of our clock signals, and not a static 50%, a changing 50%, are making it through to Manus to give it a different rhythm. So that's what I'm doing. And then we can use the bias control on branches to kind of bias the coin flip. So if I turn the knob all the way to the left, then every single trigger is being sent out the same side. So if I turn it all the way to the right, we hear nothing because all of the triggers are going to out B, which is not patched. All the way to the left, every single trigger gets sent to out A. And then at noon, we've got a 50-50 chance of whether we get the trigger or not. So maybe I'll bias it a little bit right so our trigger pattern is a little sparser. And let me turn the blend on Ruina off so we're hearing just the dry sound on Manus. Which you can hear. That actually sounds tuned pretty well. So let's see, one thing we can do here is we have a built-in multiple inside Lapsus Os. So there's 4 additional outputs. You get 2 outputs of the same signal for each channel. So we can use our random modulation from Mimetic Digitalis, and we can send those 4 signals into stuff on Manus Ateritas. So let's do the low pass filter, maybe the envelope amount, and the saw mod. This running through Ruina Versio distortion as a send effect. It's currently fully dry, but let's bring that up to 50-50. Let's go to kind of all kind of neutral settings, and let's dial something in that sounds good. So turning up the octavizing, which is kind of, I think, the most prominently audible distortion. A lot of wave folding. Change the phase to give a little bit of stereo image. And change the center frequency of the distortion to begin kind of on the higher range, so it's more audible through the sort of the low end provided by Door. We can send a few more random modulation signals too. We've got a couple of more kind of pseudo-random signals from the Oct Expander we could use. Maybe change the wave folding amount. And maybe what else? The phase a little bit. And let's get some reverb and delay on our Manus signal too. Philip, welcome to the stream. Thank you very much. This does indeed slap. Modular and random modulation just always gives you something fun. Let's also give a slow bipolar LFO into the blend on Luna Versio, so that we're kind of changing the amount of the distorted signal that we hear over time. So I've got the knob positioned exactly at noon, and then I'm just going very slowly left and right, essentially, to kind of give us only the dry signal or only the wet signal. Let's also give some delay and reverb to the hi-hat and the snare. We don't have a pitch signal to either of our oscillators, so we could also try giving a pitch sequence to some of this. As a matter of fact, looking at my left case, by the way, how's my audio levels? Have you all been able to hear me speaking over this, now that it's much louder than it was? Might need to turn the volume of the music down a little bit. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Let me turn it a little bit down just in case. So on my left case, I actually have a CV sort of step sequence programmed into stages. So why don't we take another copy of our clock signal from the right case and plug that into the gate on stages to advance the step sequencer. And then we'll take the CV signal of each step and send that through the barred quartet, which is a quad channel quantizer, but we only need one channel right now. We'll send the output of that into maybe Manus, because that's the kind of more audible pitch voice. And then let's just give it a minor scale, maybe, or we'll just add in a couple of notes. Not super different. I might need to attenuate this signal or just change these values. So what I've got here on stages is each one of these sliders represents like a CV value that's going through the quantizer, so it'll be a different pitch going to the Manus pitch input. And I've got it set so that like the odd numbered steps are all at their minimum, so they're going to be the root note. And then the other three I'm kind of just moving around to get different pitches that are in scale. So each time I move one of these other sliders, we'll get a different pitch at that position. And because there's 6 steps that are just repeating on each 16th note clock pulse, we're not getting like the same note at the same point in the loop each time. The CV values that come out of this are much larger than you'd usually want for a pitch sequence, which is why I'm leaving them kind of in the lower range of the sliders. What's the term? Like distance, I guess. But we could also send this through an attenuator. That might be a good way to do this. guess I'll just use different colors. So I'm going to send the raw CV from stages into an attenuator, and from there into the quantizer. So we're now attenuating the raw CV by about 50%, so that you can hear that the range is not so extreme. Actually, we might want to go down even more, like 25% of the signal now coming through. So now I can move these sliders higher in their sort of range without getting pitches that are too high. We can also slew the pitch change a little bit with these knobs. So just kind of messing with various controls, give a little variety. The amount of snare on the snare drum, and sort of the baseline frequencies of the melodic voices by changing the filter cutoffs and the amount of filter modulation coming through. The length of the amplitude and filter envelope on Manus. Maybe the mode on Manus, we can try the metal mode. Well, I guess that's about the idea. If anyone has any questions or would like to see any additional changes to this, I'm happy to entertain. Otherwise, I think maybe we'll wrap it up a little early today, because I feel like this is kind of a good end state, honestly. So for anyone that tuned in late, this was all based on trying to experiment with the new door firmware for the Jasmine Olive Trees Doppler module. If you want to see all the details of Doppler, which is kind of the core firmware, be sure to check out the video that I posted last week. It's really, really cool. It also gives like a full example of the firmware switching, which we did at the beginning of the stream as well. Alright, I'm not seeing any questions, so maybe we'll wrap it up. This was cool though, I'm pretty happy with what we came up with here. I think it sounds really cool. Basis for a very good sort of electro-industrial sort of track. So again, my name is Jimmy. I post videos and do these live streams about electronic music production, mostly with modular synth, about once a week. If you like the work I'm doing, I would appreciate your support on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Perceptes, and you can subscribe for free if you want, which will just give you updates about new stuff that I've created. But if you're able to chip in a few dollars a month, that would really help me a lot in sustainably continuing to make these videos and do these live streams. And you'll get a bunch of extra stuff too. Anyone on a paid patron tier will get patch notes for any of my educational videos, so you can go through at your leisure and recreate everything that I've done and sort of study it, break it apart, use it in your own music. And for any of the musical performances that I post on the channel, you also get high quality audio downloads of the music. I post sample packs on occasion. You'll get full access to the community Discord server, which you're also free to join even without signing up for Patreon, and I hope that you will. Come chat with us on the Discord server. So I'll put up the screen in a second that has links to these things, and I'll be back next week. Thank you for those of you who are here live, and for anyone watching on the recording. I hope this was useful and entertaining. Thank you very much. See you next time.